Hey there, welcome to episode 31 of the Cafe Genius Impresarios audio program. I am your host, Dan Hugo. Today is another solo episode. It's the 29th of September, 2023. It's the end of the Mobile World Congress week, half week, Tuesday, Wednesday, some of Thursday here in Las Vegas. So busy week, a lot of talking loud. My voice probably sounds a little bit different. It's a little bit off. It's not behaving. So I'll probably do that a few times. Anyway, welcome to this episode, which I will call Food Trucks and EIE, the Entrepreneurial Innovation Ecosystem. We were supposed to have a guest today, but it's been a crazy week. So that will be possibly next week or the week after. So let's get another solo show started. Episode 31 already. Crazy. So why food trucks? Well, I'll tell you, I'm able to compare two vertical focal areas, mobile vending, in two different places. So the entrepreneurial ecosystem, or the entrepreneurial innovation ecosystem that I've started referring to in the Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area, Silicon Valley, and technically more Silicon Valley. I was down south in the South Bay, where Silicon Valley sort of is centered, but this applies to the Bay Area also. And here in Vegas. Did you know we have a food truck ecosystem here in Vegas? Probably, because you've probably been to First Friday. You may not know much more about it than that, but let's talk about that. So food trucks. Why food trucks? What does this have to do with entrepreneurialism? I know, loaded question. Food trucks are almost always individually owned. They're entrepreneurs. They want to test the concept. They have their own business. They want to test the concept, or they want to have their own business. So they either are like a chef with a concept. They want to try it out. So a food truck, the cost of entry is reasonably lower, usually, depending on what you're going for on your deployment concept of your food concept. And by the way, food trucks doesn't have to be food. It could be coffee, it could be desserts, which are still food sort of, or it could be not food. But today we're going to stick with just the traditional food truck, because we can also look at luncheros and things. So yeah, you want to try a new concept, or maybe you just want to have your own business. So maybe you're an entrepreneur and you want to try this out before you drop a whole bunch of money into a full, retail establishment, brick and mortar, tenant improvements, all the taxes and fees and joy of that. So you may want to test that out and then test your business in different locations and see, what they say, location. And, or maybe you just want to move around. Maybe you don't want to be tied down to a brick and mortar location. You want to try your hand at having a business of some sort and see it's sort of the same as the other two, but rule of three, So they can either be traditional, right? Some of the best food trucks I've been to are traditional flavors. The foods that the owner grew up with, they're bringing them to the world. Sometimes they call that authentic, although some people don't like that term. It's maybe condescending. Or they can take a risk on innovation, which means they'll make fusion tacos. Kimchi tacos are famously where Koja Kitchen? No, sorry, that's up in the Bay Area. What's the? I'm totally spacing on the one in LA, which kind of kicked off the more recent trend in artisanal food trucks, making unusual fusion dishes. But innovation, doing something different. Now, this is not to say that authentic entrepreneurs and their authentic food truck concepts cannot also be innovative. Because guess what? You have to be innovative if your customers can't find you. So whether you're innovating on the menu, or on the preparation techniques, or on the wrap of your truck, or how you engage your customers, or promotion, or the use of tools, used to be in the pre-days, in the pre-Twitter. Well, actually, I think Twitter is given a lot of credit why am I not remembering the name of that truck in LA? But basically, they started posting on Twitter like, "Hey, we're over here, we're over there," and you could follow them on Twitter, and you had your own little feed, and other food trucks started catching on. And so taking a possible tool making it yours and using it to do your business and to engage your customers and go on about your day is a form of innovation. So, and as well, there's always competition. So no more true in the Bay Area or Los Angeles, where there are 10 food trucks for every person, something like that. So competition, where food truck owners help each other, and yet they're in the same market, so they're competing for customers, usually. The example I always give, in the Bay Area has a large body of water right in the middle of it, hence the name. And various vendors, various owners would tweet to their regular customers. They would always tag other owners that would be at the same event they were going to or nearby. They would always say, if you can't make it out here, go check out our friends across the bay at a different event, right? There were different organizers, different events. Each had a collection of different food trucks all mixed together. It was an opportunity for a Friday night to build the marketplace, right? The more food truck fans there are in a cooperative marketplace, the more everybody benefits. There's more customers. So every time you couldn't have someone come to your event, if you made sure that they went to an event, and this is usually Friday or Saturday, and I'll get to some of that soon regarding events, but that's developing the marketplace. So you're cultivating the culture, which is critical, so that people will be willing or interested to try out these new crazy rolling kitchens. Why would I want to go to a food truck when I can go to a restaurant? Well, they're almost the same thing. So, and then we're going to compare what that means in the Bay Area, where I'm much more familiar, and here in Vegas, where I'm also familiar. So how is that possible? What do I even know about food trucks? Have you ever read Kitchen Confidential? What do you know about meat? What do you know about food trucks? First of all, when I was living in the Bay Area, when I was in Silicon Valley doing my software engineering thing, I once asked a bartender how they connected with their regular customers, and there was no Facebook page. They weren't into Twitter, so it was mostly Facebook, but there were no Facebook pages. So you would become Facebook friends with your regulars, and that's how you would chat with them. And that has some problems. I would always say, do you want to be Facebook friends with all of your regulars? And no, I don't. So there was no buffer between bartenders, for example. And this, it turns out it applies to baristas, hairstylists, just any job where you have a clientele, but where you might be moving around. So if you are in a line of work where you might have different shifts, different times, different places, different clientele, engaging with them was always tricky. So I built Regular DB, inspired in the name by Internet Movie Database, IMDb. No one liked that name, so too bad. Regular DB was to connect regulars with their regular barista, bartender, etc. I once spoke to an In-N-Out manager, and she said, people call ahead to see who's working in the grill. So you never know. You never know who has a regular following. And it was always interesting to me that the people with the regular following actually bring business in to a particular retail establishment, for example, and they sometimes get credit for it. They sometimes are appreciated because they're the draw. That might be true if you're like, bartender for the evening is Mark Wahlberg, which can be true here in Las Vegas. But your normal everyday bartender or barista or In-N-Out grill chef is not always quite so high on the celebrity totem pole. I don't know. That's not a good use of that word. So yeah, they don't always get the credit for making the customers want to come to that establishment. But it turns out that people do travel if they know their favorite bar. Cheers set the bar for everybody wanting to go where they know your name, right? So you're going to go because the bartender that you like is working. I asked several potential customers in Silicon Valley, and which is also interesting, which I'll get to in a moment. In Silicon Valley, spoke with many smaller bar owners and bartenders, and 75% of incoming phone calls were about who's working. That was the question. So knowing where your favorites are is actually a thing. And Silicon Valley was interesting because there was an early adopter mindset. The culture of entrepreneurial innovation and its ecosystem were thriving. They were. I can't really say that now. That's a whole nother topic for another time. So in getting to know, so RegularDB, it was a tough sell. I was really looking at hyperlocal marketing for monetization. If I'm going to that location because I know my favorite person is working or my favorite bartender, barista, etc., like I said, then businesses nearby might want to advertise to me. Hey, we know you're going to be going to that coffee shop. Why don't you stop down here to this bookstore or pick up some groceries here, whatever it is, because you're going to be local. So inbound marketing, sort of. That was a hard sell, and it was right around 2008. So the marketplace was a little weird, financial crisis and whatnot. So I started talking to food truck owners. I went to a food truck event in Palo Alto, California, and I said, this is cool. How do people figure out where you are? And they said, Twitter or not. And then you run into a problem. Well, who's following you on Twitter? How do they know? What if they're not using Twitter? And I heard that all the time. What if I don't use Twitter? And there was often a loss of words. They were at a loss for words. So I kind of got into the food truck marketplace because mobile vending and mobile customers, they're all moving around. How do you connect them? And then I have one of my tropes is my favorite spot isn't always right where you left it. No, your favorite spot isn't always right where you left it. The place I went to, it's my favorite food truck. It was right here yesterday. Where is it today? I don't know. And so this was a thing. This was a common problem, and it actually still is. And which I'll get to that towards the end of this list I'm about to commence. So I got into the food truck marketplace, but not as a food truck owner, which I've heard sometimes. You don't even own a food truck. What do you even know about this? Well, I worked on 7 food trucks, which is often more than any food truck owner has worked on. So I had different experiences with different types of owners, different types of foods, different types of marketplaces, and so on, just to find out what it was like being on a food truck. I changed rules in 2 cities, Sunnyvale, California, Mountain View, California. So I went to their city council meetings. I lobbied for some rule changes, for some zoning to enable more mobile vending. So different rules for events to enable more events, more realistic expectations as far as permitting, business licenses, capacities. They were concerned about traffic flow if there was a food truck and it started having backed up traffic, and so there were a variety of things that those cities worked with mobile vendors for mutual benefit. It was actually a pretty good deal. I organized some events. I worked with event organizers a lot, and some of those things I did, especially the lobbying, was because I formed an owners association in the Bay Area. I collaborated with the Southern California Mobile Food Vendors Association, Matt Geller, founder. He presently, I think he still has the National Food Truck Association, I think it is. And he has an application called Best Food Trucks, I think it is, which is interesting also. So I formed an owners association in the Bay Area. Also formed one in Vegas, which I'll get to in a second. I worked with health departments in both Bay Area and Las Vegas. And I happened, because Matt Geller is an attorney, I happened to have an opportunity in the Bay Area back then to speak at 3 law schools about mobile vending regulations. They were extremely small law schools. You've probably never heard of them. San Francisco, University of San Francisco, USF Law School, Berkeley, and Stanford. So it was a good time. I learned a lot during the Bay Area experience. And when I moved to Vegas, I felt that they needed something. Eventually, by the way, I'm going to steer this monologue towards how this is an analog for a general entrepreneurial innovation ecosystem, right? So you have mobile people moving around, trying to address their marketplace with their customers, and they're also moving around. So people have to be innovative, and they're entrepreneurial already when they own a food truck. So how do they thrive where they're trying to connect this business, grow a business, develop a following? And I should point out my family owned a restaurant when I was 10. So I was bussing tables and working the cash register. My mom is like, she has worked in restaurants through her life and her family, which is my family by extension. Her family was in the restaurant business as well back in the day. My dad's an accountant, cost accounting, so I learned how to operate the till, and then the general restaurant business my mom was familiar with, of course. And so cash handling, cash management, and general food service business was covered, family. In addition, I worked in restaurants, McDonald's and Fuddruckers and etc. And then later I would work in food trucks. Still a software engineer, still interested in the math and science of mobile vending, but hands-on understanding how the business works on the ground, so to speak, or on the wheels, I think was important. And like I said, I'm often asked, what do you even know about food trucks? And so that's a taste. So food trucks have to thrive, or try to, in an ecosystem, which we've talked about over several episodes, and we still will. It's fundamental. An ecosystem that hopefully enables entrepreneurialism. So I mentioned changing rules in two cities. Usually, whether it's protectionist regulations for keeping ice cream trucks away from schools, which is common, because we're worried about the children, which is fine. They should not be running across the street to get an ice cream bar, or entering strange and unknown neighborhoods to get a bomb pop. So they typically don't want ice cream trucks. In your town, they probably say, ice cream trucks cannot operate within 1,000 feet of a school or near a liquor store or something. So you don't want to draw young people to places where they should not be, or have them crossing streets dangerously from places where they are to go to these ice cream trucks. So oftentimes regulations are started there with ice cream trucks, and whether they're good or not, that's another discussion. But the source of some of these regulations are ice cream trucks, and then they just don't account for the different type of business that is any mobile vending, whether it's food trucks or not food trucks. If you're selling anything from a moving platform, they don't know what to make of it in most places. This was true 10 years ago, certainly 15 years ago. So you had regulation issues, protectionism eventually would start creeping in and say, well, we don't want you to come and compete with this brick and mortar place because they pay rent and you don't. So that's a sort of a misunderstanding about the history of America and England, two countries separated by a common language, right? So there are two businesses separated by wildly different constraints, two similar businesses. So restaurants, yes, they pay rent, but they also have an infinite pantry by comparison, right? Food trucks can only carry a certain amount of inventory to create however many menu items, and then they're done. Very difficult to split your kitchen in a food truck, so you can sometimes have a rough time delivering proper, vegetarian, vegan, gluten-free, etc. The list goes on. So oftentimes government regulation, protectionism can get in the way, can cause trouble, and the same exact things can happen in an entrepreneurial ecosystem in general. And this is why I often say that the government is one of the four pillars of an entrepreneurial ecosystem. The government should provide infrastructure and regulation that enables, which I suppose could mean protects, but if the protectionism becomes lopsided and ends up picking winners, that becomes tricky. Well, that is certainly true in the food truck business. There's a one common example, and I have not checked to see what the current state of affairs is. But in the Bay Area, there were 5 or 6 counties where food trucks would typically operate. You got wheels, might as well use them. So 5 or 6. So the 6th county was Santa Cruz, and that was a bit of a drive. So some would go, some would not. Or sometimes people were based in Santa Cruz, so they'd have Santa Cruz plus maybe the west side of the West Bay, I guess, the peninsula. So they'd have like Santa Clara County and San Mateo, San Francisco. So, say you have 3, 4, 5, 6 counties. Those are 3, 4, 5, 6 health departments. That's 3, 4, 5, 6 inspections. That's a lot of paperwork and fees, time. So, hey, can you guys make a unified inspection that we can just do once and get covered for all counties? Well, governments are not, county governments, county health departments are not set up for that. So that became a government issue, a political and argumentative nightmare, because it's a lot of money. It starts really adding up, from all of the people I talked to, and that was a lot of people. So similarly, if you are in an entrepreneurial ecosystem where the government is not helpful or it is not keeping up with the times, you could say. So it's a similar problem. And when you see it put into action, as I had directly, you can really start to see where systemic issues can really interrupt business. They can stifle it. Entrepreneurialism is great, but when you're prevented from being entrepreneurial, it can be a real pain. So Clark County being one county makes it a little bit easier. You have one health department. I will say I heard the words from the mouth of the person who would have this decision-making authority that they don't like in the Clark County area food trucks operating so near restaurants that pay tens of thousands of dollars per month in a lease when they don't pay rent for anything. So it's old school thinking. We're not going to change that here, but my point is that these regulatory bodies, these agencies, and their regulation and eventually legislation can have a real impact on business. And it does here in Vegas, which I will get to shortly. So a healthy community of food truck owners or entrepreneurs in some other vertical can work together to try to change these things. But oftentimes, in the early days in an immature ecosystem, there will be factions. There will be, I need to survive. I need to have my business succeed. Therefore, I'm going to worry about me. And so the concern is more about how can I get around the regulations rather than change them. And this is possibly true in a young entrepreneurial ecosystem for, say, biotech or even food, right? If you need to have regulations changed to, health department regulations for how food is prepared, and you want to have home kitchens. Hey, we'd like to prepare food at home for a mom and pop home business, popular during the pandemic, perhaps. Alcohol delivery, right? That was a weird one here in Vegas. So you had to actually change the rules to enable those types of business, and it could be anything: books, barbecue. I keep going to food because that's the easy one here in Vegas, but like I said, biotech or enabling people to visit your home for your home-based business. I know someone who has a gym, and this prototype equipment was in their living room, and you have to enable people to come in there. So at some point, if somebody wanted to say something, they'd say, hey, you're having your business people come to your home. You're operating a business out of your home. That requires additional permitting. Or they might even say, hey, you're impacting traffic or quality of life in your neighborhood. And so that might stifle that innovation and that entrepreneurial effort. And it might even be a judgment call, right? So it might not be as much of an impact on the neighborhood as is being alleged. So then it becomes an issue to investigate. And sometimes there won't be an investigation. It'll just be a simple matter of pay up or shut down. Co-opetition is key, as I mentioned. It is very important that competitors especially a young ecosystem, but an ecosystem where there is room for multiple competitors, it's important to take advantage of that, because the marketplace can grow with healthy cooperation and can improve itself with healthy competition, right? If your competitor is doing a little bit better than you, then you should do a little bit better than them. And everybody wins, right? Except for the one who doesn't do better. But cooperating enables the marketplace to actually grow. If you have 2, 3, 5, 100 competitors and you all work together to develop a culture, cultivate a culture, in fact, of food truck customers, people who enjoy mobile food. Or if you develop a culture, cultivate that culture of people in the greater Vegas area who appreciate local tech startups, right? Most people in Vegas don't have any idea that there's a community of people pursuing technology startups, whether it's software or hardware or in unusual innovations, right? So if you have no idea, it's difficult to garner support. It's difficult to be noticed. It's difficult to get the word out about trying out new products and so on. So the competition component is interesting in a new, young, immature ecosystem. Cooperation is probably key. Competition will come later. And it's no fun to get killed off because people don't talk or work together or establish these marketplaces and grow them and cultivate that culture. The culture goes both ways, by the way. The entrepreneurs have to have a culture of entrepreneurial innovation that they can thrive in. And that means being able to find people to work and being able to find places from which to work. And that applies to everything, food trucks or otherwise. As well, a customer culture that is willing to try things. In the Bay Area, I have to say, the culture of innovation in the Bay Area is strong, or was strong. It has been stronger. Let's put it that way. People are always up for trying new things. And by the way, that created a huge lunchtime market. So that means you could go to a food truck anywhere near where you were working at the time. There'd probably be 3 or 4 food trucks that you could walk to. That was not uncommon. So the market was able to grow and establish that demand and that awareness. And there were enough food truck vendors, business owners, entrepreneurs to service those needs. So competition, while it was still alive and well, combined with cooperation, established a growing market of demand and satisfaction. And that would draw more people to food truck events, which would get a little bit out of hand size-wise. It'd be huge. And that made those events sensible because you could engage new customers because the culture fed back on itself. So you had people willing to try these things, interested in the social activation aspects or the portable variety, as I like to say. So the same can be true in a tech ecosystem, or, well, we already have our culinary ecosystem here. Our entertainment, our sports entertainment. We have a culture as a destination city, people coming here for a certain set of expectations to be met. A certain demand is already established, right? If you're going to go to Vegas, you expect a certain amount of gaming potential. Now we have more sports, the ability to see a show, to try a bunch of different types of foods, restaurants, and so on. Not sure that people, when they come to Vegas, are aware of the food truck marketplace, for example, because food trucks are not appreciated on the Strip, which everybody knows about the Strip, but they don't know about food trucks because the food trucks aren't allowed on the Strip. They compete with the brick and mortar restaurants, right? So if you create an ecosystem for entrepreneurs, but you prevent them from functioning and operating to grow a marketplace, you stifle parts of that ecosystem. And that was never more true than it is in the food truck marketplace, in my experience. So yeah, culture matters. And like I said, people from all over the world come to Vegas. I think we're back up to about 40 million people a year visiting, according to the Las Vegas Convention and Visitors Authority. And so it's an opportunity to have different people experience what you are offering and selling. And by the way, even if you have a food truck, if you are a mobile vendor with one location and not fixed, I know some of the more successful mobile vendors will package some of their products to ship to people. So even though I'm selling my product here today, prepared in my mobile kitchen, if you like the sauces, if you like the dessert items, if you know, whatever it is, whatever they can actually ship to people in whatever form. And then I'm sure there's opportunities for franchising, and as they grow bigger, I have views on that, which I will not go into here. But essentially, if you can engage with customers, you have opportunities. That's how that works. And that is true in food trucks. That's also true in software. That's true in hardware. That's true in art, science, creativity, all of it. So if you're trying to make something for other people, it's important that they see it or taste it or try it, smell it, touch it. So let's compare and contrast. Like I said, I formed owners associations, the Bay Area Mobile Food Vendors Association in cooperation with the Southern California Mobile Food Vendors Association in the Bay Area. And then in Las Vegas, we formed the Nevada Mobile Vendors Association, NMVA. We tried to cast a wider net and include more tent and booth vendors here in the Bay Area. Here in Vegas. In the Bay Area, it was more focused on technical limitations. So various aspects of the way Southern California did their thing was heavily focused on mobile kitchens, which are food trucks, or food carts, which is sort of a surprise when you think about it. But it's food carts are literally mobile kitchens without the metal body of a food truck, but they're otherwise very similar. Food tents and booths are like some assembly required, if that makes sense. So it's a different type of thing. But we tried here in the Bay Area. In the Bay Area, it was like that. We tried here in Vegas to have a unified owners association to help with some of the various issues that small businesses on wheels or tent poles would run into. So let's compare and contrast the culture and community. The Bay Area, there was an innovation culture, like I said there. So there was a strong mobile vending community that helped itself. It always cross-promoted itself, as I mentioned, always uplifting for newcomers to the marketplace. The only time I ever saw like overt angst was if an inexperienced organizer said, "Hey, we're inviting 5 food trucks to an event. Would you like to be one of them?" "Oh, yes, sure, of course." And you show up and there's 2 of the 5 food trucks, including yours, are selling exactly the same product. And the one I'm imagining as I tell this generic story is an event in Los Gatos, California, that the first time they did it, they invited 2 Korean barbecue trucks. So therefore, the 2 were in direct competition, very similar products, makes it a little bit tricky. You're splitting all of the attendance, you're splitting between, it could be 50-50, rarely, right? So for the most part, though, there was always cross promotion. I still look back on that time as with a certain amount of maybe amazement at just how cohesive a competitive community can be. So that competition part really came into play, and the culture of adoption of new things on the customer side, the culture of adoption of new technologies on the vendor side, new methods. So Twitter, now it's Instagram, Facebook. Everybody had the Facebook, and Yelp, of course. Get that review out there, which is strange because Yelp would never have a location for the food trucks, right? So you'd find them on Yelp and you have no idea where they are. But there was room for more innovation still. In Vegas, the culture is of hospitality, gaming, entertainment, nightlife, and so on, which means people on the customer side are more in tune with a fixed location, with shining lights, bright lights, big city, going to known locations, and then finding places near. If you're on the Strip, if you're visiting, or if you go downtown. Downtown used to have food trucks. If you're familiar with downtown Las Vegas, the Fremont Street Experience, the Viva Vision, the Gold Nugget, the Plaza. If you're a Back to the Future fan, Biff's Plaza. If you're familiar with that area, they would sometimes have food trucks back in 10 years ago, in 2013-ish, 14. In fact, I think there might even still be a parking space on Stewart. I think on Stewart and about 4th. I think it's by the Gold, not the Gold Nugget, the Gold Spike. Yeah, I think there's a marked space reserved for food trucks. So there used to be 3 food truck locations and a lottery. So there was some innovation there. In fact, Code for Vegas played a role in rolling out the first, and this was before I was a part of it, but played a role in building this lottery scheme to get food trucks to operate downtown. So 3. Occasionally there would be a food truck event downtown, but I believe the argument was that these food trucks are stealing our business. So the entrepreneurial bent was leaning away from opportunity and customer service. Let's prevent those smaller businesses from stealing our customers. So the culture was more competitive. on the business owner side, and it was definitely split between mobile and fixed vending. The health department here, as I said, favors fixed. So regulations, permitting, and so on favor fixed food. So the entrepreneurs, despite our best intentions, do not always have opportunities that would otherwise be available to places to entrepreneurs in other places. So there's a self-serving focus there, and it's not healthy. It makes it difficult to operate a new mobile vending business here. And that's not my opinion. That's direct from people trying to do it. Innovation, well, that's pretty easy. I've already alluded to some of the things. In the Bay Area, there was an early adoption of everything. When I had the Owners Association, and because I'm a software engineer, the owners would often point people to me. I would very often hear, "Hey Dan, did you see that person over there? They're showing their new app around to all the people here, the owners." So what you ended up with in Silicon Valley was every couple of weeks somebody would roll out a new mobile app for their iPhone, BlackBerry. Remember those? And they were all the same thing. They would read a Twitter feed. They would try to publish some new interesting way of repackaging "I am here today." And I would always say, how come I can't find out where you are tomorrow or where you were yesterday? That'll be a topic for another time. But because I also wrote an app. So everybody was early to adopt. They were very interested in the latest craze because guess what? In Silicon Valley, most people had a cell phone or were using a computer or were familiar with technology. So the owners of mobile vending vehicles would embrace those technologies to try to reach their customers wherever they were, or perhaps wherever they would be. And that latter one was a rarity, which is still a problem. So Vegas, on the other hand, is slow to adopt. Vegas is just slow moving in general. I want to say possibly because of the heavy focus on gaming, which has led to heavy focus and accommodation for regulation, right? No gaming. The Nevada Gaming Commission controls a lot of things, right? So no casino, no resort, no location with gaming wants to cross that. They don't want to cause any trouble. So we tend to, I think, this is speculation, but we tend to really give in to some of these regulations that, for the purpose of business, you don't want to rock the boat. So if, as I've mentioned, if regulations are already in place to protect brick and mortar restaurants, well, the restaurants don't want to rock that boat, and mobile vendors individually don't have the voice. So then it came down to, why don't you form an owners association and you have a louder voice together? And because of the more competitive and less cooperative nature of the younger ecosystem here for mobile vending, that was very difficult. And that I can say from the voice of experience, or in the voice of experience. So there's much more of a tendency here to let someone else do it. Heavy reliance on Instagram, not so much early adopters of new technologies, new methods, and much more inclined to operate individually and try to work around or ignore regulations that get in the way. That's just the way it is. So not as much competition or cooperation, more competition. And customers in the Bay Area are, the customers in the Bay Area were early adopters. They tended to try things. This is why there were so many food truck events on Fridays to Saturdays. I always space on the name, the one in San Francisco that everybody knows about, which I should know the name. Perhaps it will come to me, but it's not coming to me. Everybody knows it. If you are a food truck fan in the Bay Area or have even been there, you'll say, "Oh, of course it's that." And I've been there, and I know the guy Matt Cohen, who started it. But you had events like Movable Feast. You had, which by the way was a name of a company that was an organizer. So Movable Feast as a brand would appear in different places with different food trucks. They would promote them. So Movable Feast would have a website. They would promote the vendors that were going to be at an event, and they would promote the event. They would charge the vendors fees, and that was fine. Because guess what? Because people were such big fans of mobile vending, they would have vendors at their offices, office parks, places of business for lunch. And so the food trucks would be able to keep their money at those events, not pay fees. And the going rate was $25 plus 10%, I believe it was. 10% rev share plus 25. So that would cover the marketing efforts and whatnot. Now, unfortunately, that led to an established market rate that people would pay, out of ignorance, in my opinion, to anyone. So Movable Feast, Food Truck Mafia was another one. There were a few different organizers. They would charge the 25 plus 10, and there would be a lot of services for that. There'd be location management. There'd be trash collection, right? So people would go around and collect garbage bags, basically. So to keep everything moving along, you had a support infrastructure, you had the marketing, you had permitting, all that was taken care of. So you'd just show up, you'd have load in time, you'd get there, everything was prepared. There were garbage cans, possibly some seating, some people to guide people around. Hey, what is this? Oh, it's a food truck event. Here's how it works. So it was an actual business with an actual service offering to the entrepreneurs. Unfortunately, that enabled a secondary marketplace where people would say, I have a parking lot, give me $25 and 10%. And you get nothing for that. You'd have to promote. So it was rent seeking in that case. So these are normal problems. But this is when you had that kind of culture, you'd see the good and the bad. But that enabled the business to develop and grow. Much more access to customers as early adopters. Everybody had a device with Twitter on it at the time. And then later Instagram and whatever else. Trying out different mobile apps. Roaming Hunger became very popular in there. Food Trucks In is another one. And now I mentioned Matt Geller. He had his Southern California Mobile Food Vendors Association and built an app called Lot Mom, which eventually became Best Food Trucks. So now you can book a food truck for your business and have them come for lunch. And then guess what? He gets a percentage of that. So I think he does rev share. So it's like commission sales, you're establishing marketplaces. So anyway, this is where innovation and entrepreneurialism blend between the people doing the mobile vending and the people enabling that business, connecting with customers, doing marketplace analysis, maybe even lobbying for changes in the marketplace regulation. So it's a nice circle of elevation eventually. So in Vegas, we have far more events that people become aware of. First Friday is my favorite to refer to because it has become food trucks. First Friday, food trucks. When in fact, First Friday is a day on a calendar. So First Friday could be anywhere in the world on a calendar. It's the first Friday of the month. Food trucks can be anywhere, anytime because they have wheels. So here in Vegas, they're inextricably, and perhaps inexplicably linked. And I have spoken to actual human beings who did not know that food trucks could be elsewhere. Probably don't get out much. But there are other more ridiculously more expensive events like the Foodie Fest. There are others. I don't care for Foodie Fest. I don't give them my money. But the same thing. It's organized events that charge high fees, and they sometimes charge admission for customers. Foodie Fest does that. So you end up a lot of rent seeking, and then don't promote the food trucks. So it's a sort of a lopsided business. The food trucks are to promote the event. But the big take home is even though you engage customers, Foodie Fest, you're going to engage more tourists, which is fine, I suppose. And they invite food trucks from other places. So you might go see a food truck from LA here in Vegas, which is fine also. But you don't so often develop a new customer base. So you don't find people who say, can you come to my office for lunch? How do I book you? Nobody's really prepared for that. Why? Because most of the business here, in my experience, is either individuals who operate more focused on themselves and then eschew events. They don't really go to them. They just operate on their own. Or if they go to an event, it'll be now and then. It'll be, if they have time available, or to try it out, see if it's a good fit. But mostly mobile vendors here depend on organizers to get them business. I very rarely saw proactive outreach to small businesses or shopping malls or strip malls. Hey, can I be in your parking lot here at lunch? And the permitting and regulations here make that a little bit tricky as well. You have to be a certain distance from a restaurant and so on. So yeah, these are, and all of these things I've just said here apply in general to varying degrees so that when you want to operate your business, you have to look at local regulations. Food is a tricky one because of health departments, but also competition. So like I said, the brick and mortar restaurants rule, especially here in Vegas. And then you have to look at your customers. How do you reach them? Do they understand the notion of trying new things? Are they going to tend to stick with the tried and true? Does local media, as part of the local culture, embrace this new way of doing things, whether it's food or tech or bio or research or anything? Or do they tend to cover the usual? So here again, in the Bay Area, local media, of course, was talking about startups and businesses and stock markets and new products and crazy. You know what they didn't talk about was how awful cell phone coverage was for a decade in Silicon Valley. But it was always a place of technology and innovation, and the people there understood that. It was sort of built in, all levels. You just kind of knew. You would drive by Apple and Netscape and Facebook now and or Meta, I guess. Here in Vegas, because the attention is so heavily skewed towards the entertainment, the Strip, which is not in the city of Las Vegas, by the way. We were much more excited about the Sphere and whether the Oakland A's will become the Las Vegas A's and tear down another old resort in the Tropicana and replace it with a new shiny baseball stadium. Those are the sorts of entrepreneurial endeavors that get coverage here, not a small business, certainly not food trucks. So the take home for all this, and by the way, I think I mentioned, I actually was developing some software for food trucks. So rather than being a customer and saying, I'll just read your Twitter feed and repackage the information you post, which was always error prone. I said, okay, now that I've worked on all these food trucks and I understand the business, I analyzed what customer needs were, also vendor needs, also organizer needs, also host venue needs, and was building towards that to sort of be a all-in-one solution, mostly because all of those things do go together. It's really difficult to discover a food truck on the customer side if the food truck owner doesn't have business. They can't just operate anywhere they want. So sort of completing that circle, two sides of the same coin, right? Getting the business and then getting the customers to come to where you are getting the business. So deep dive analysis of a marketplace and some gaps, I think, is highly valuable. And it's something that we try to do with the projects we're doing with Cafe Genius. So the Genius Roundtable is one such thing. The Pitch Mingle and Pitch Workout Room ideas are to try to engage more aspirational entrepreneurs, to get them talking about their ideas. That's how you make things happen. Get them out of your head. And there have always been some other things on the back burner, but as we catch on more, the Downtown Project retrospective, always on the back burner, but I think even more critical than I've been saying it was and is, because understanding what we had, what worked and what didn't in the Downtown Project and its surrounding areas, and then what we're trying to do now. And if you are here in any capacity, a part of the entrepreneurial ecosystem, whether you're opening a restaurant or a bar or a bookstore or a nail salon or a used clothing store or a tech startup, coffee shop, hopefully, you're part of this. And so often these smaller facets of criticality go unnoticed because attention is so often on the usual, not the innovative. The novel gets no attention in Clark County. When it does, it gets 2 minutes. And this is something to think about as well. To go back to food trucks for a moment, when you see food trucks on the freeway going to lunch gigs, we'll say, so every day you'd see a dozen food trucks going the other direction, usually, but going up north, going down south, going across the bay, going on the Bay Bridge, or rarely on the Golden Gate, the Dumbarton perhaps, and you'd see food trucks. They were in your visual field of view often, and you could see them mentioned on Twitter, and you'd see them talked about in general. And of course, this is where social media influencer really comes into play, because people tweet pictures of their food or pictures of a food truck or where am I, which event am I going to. So it all feeds back on itself. And this is that culture component, the innovation and innovative uses of technologies and the tools of the day. So there was always a sort of energy behind this part of the overall ecosystem and culture of the Bay Area was making artisanal food trucks. And I mentioned rancheros earlier. Rancheros also are more common than people know. There are quite a few, we'll say just taco trucks, right? Taco trucks here in the Bay Area. Here in the Vegas area, not so much like in the Bay Area. Here in Vegas, you'll see the same taco truck in the same parking lot of the same corner gas station or other similar business. They just post up there and that's their spot and that's the way it is, which is good for them, but it's not as great for customers for variety. But at the end of the day, the business does well and that's fine. It's not awful by any means. But rancheros are a component of this because that's where people are usually familiar with. So that the culture where you are regarding mobile vending is based sometimes on the white sort of nondescript P4, Grumman P40 or similar little basic food truck. And the notion, and some people call them the R word, which we won't use here. But they've come a long way in general. Rancheros are pretty good. They sell fixed menus, which are extremely economical, easy to plan, good margins. When you go artisanal, you have to worry about much more about portions and menu item, how your menus are constructed, costs, can sometimes get out of control. Carrying different ingredients on a fixed platform like a food truck becomes a challenge. So it's all different, but all the same, right? So if we have this, if we were to have something similar here in the Vegas area where people are just much more familiar with, seeing them every day. And that's why I always encourage getting more lunch business, show off that wrap. But we end up here is customers only see, they only see food trucks in a few places. They very, very rarely find food trucks parked in visibly obvious places. And because there's such a reliance on Instagram, and Instagram is not a purpose-built platform, you are sort of left to their whims as far as whether people see your Instagram post before or after your time slot, wherever you are. So this is just a general, this is a specific case of a general disconnect between entrepreneurial innovation in a particular ecosystem that is dominated so much by larger, more established businesses and, brick and mortar businesses in general. But yeah, doing something new in a place where there is so much momentum behind doing things similarly, or if you're going to do something new, you must do it $2.3 billion MSG sphere sized. Opening a new food truck in Vegas will get you almost no attention. Opening a new bookstore, coffee shop, etc. You're going to get very little attention. You might get some special interest coverage, and then every once in a while you'll get a Rolling Smoke or a Soul Belly barbecue spot, or a Cornish pasty company opening a new spot somewhere in Henderson, I think. So you'll get some businesses that rise above, sometimes food, sometimes not. But in a Bay Area scenario where innovation is so rampant, almost to the detriment if you look at some aspects today. But if you look at a place where people understand and are willing to try or are curious, your entrepreneurial innovation ecosystem can thrive. The culture can, as it is cultivated and grows, it becomes more fertile on the customer side and even on the entrepreneur side. There's more of an interest in trying things, novel approaches, new ideas, new solutions, new menus. So that's ultimately what I would love to see here in Vegas. Not going to take over the tourism industry, gaming, entertainment, sports entertainment now. We are not going to be the next Silicon Valley, but you can enable entrepreneurial innovation here with a few things. Support from your government in the form of regulations that do not stifle so easily well thought out arguments that are constructed around and based on data, right? Are you really stealing customers, or are you enabling an area for more customers, increasing awareness, portable variety, social activation? So government regulation, infrastructure, culture of innovation and entrepreneurialism, and that's on the customer side. And on the entrepreneur side, we want access to capital, of course. If you can fund your business, so much the better. That applies to everything, so that's always true. Even for people just trying to go get groceries, you got to have access to capital. And then finally, what was it? Education, talent. So you need to have people who can do the things that you want to do so you can grow and work and have your business grow and work. And so you need to find people that can join your company. Those people need to come from, maybe it's college, maybe it's boot camps or specialized vocational schools. Sometimes it's just knowing and being aware and developing the skills themselves, or being aware that those skills are useful. Working on a food truck is a little bit different than a restaurant, not much. Working in a software company is very different from a restaurant. Working with customers of a software company is not so different. So there's a few different ways an ecosystem can thrive and can connect all those components, whether it's food trucks or AI-driven, actuator-based gym equipment, or a cool coffee shop, or used clothing store, anything. So that was my ramble for today. Thank you for listening. It's already been an hour or something, right? As always, I will edit out a couple of chunks of this episode that went a little bit quiet for a moment. My allergies and voice have been fighting with me, so my apologies again for that. I believe next week or soon, sometime in early October, we'll have a guest to talk about our ecosystem, a returning guest, a part 2. We had a good conversation when she was here in town recently about the state of affairs. So we have a lot of catching up to do on a couple of topics, so that'll be cool. But otherwise, I thank you for listening. Thank you for liking and sharing and subscribing, or whatever you do with the software tools you're using. I noticed the other day that Google Podcasts is going away, of course. So you can still find us on Spotify and Amazon Music and a few other places. Hey, fun fact, part of our culture here, we need to make it easier to discover things, whether it's food trucks or podcasts. So that's one of the projects the Innovate for Vegas Foundation is working on. I'm the managing director of that. So you'll hear about that more. It should be easier to find this podcast episodes and show itself and its relations and other YouTubers and podcasters in and around Vegas talking about interesting things, including their own entrepreneurial innovation endeavors. So thank you very much. I will create another episode for you next week. And I thank you for listening to this one this week. Take care.